When I was a junior in high school, there was this girl I spent a lot of time thinking about. Her name was Sienna Rawlins. She had this alluring presence about her that's kind of hard to explain, but I'll try my best. She was really pretty, of course, but it was more than that. She had this mystique that I could never decipher, a mystique that you wouldn't typically associate with a generic pretty girl. She wasn't popular, and I got the impression that a lot of guys, girls too, were more intimidated by her than anything else. She wasn't warm and she didn't smile, and most people regarded her as weird. I didn't. I actually found her uniqueness kind of fascinating. Catching eyes with her would freeze me up, kind of like the way your body adjusts to a cold room or an unexpected gust of wind. She reminded me of snow, honestly, the way that a light snowfall can muffle everything around you, including your own thoughts. She had that quality, but it was like no one noticed but me. People just thought the way she kept to herself and never spoke was weird, but I was always dying to know what she was thinking. I read a lot of young adult fantasy novels around that time, so that probably had something to do with it. I wrote a lot around that time too. I actually named one of the characters in a story I was writing Sienna. You could say I was obsessed, but I also just liked that name. Anyway, I was walking up the stairs with my friend George one day, talking about that exact story, when he asked me what the characters' names were. So I told him, and of course, as soon as I mentioned the name Sienna, who turns the corner but the actual Sienna, walking with one of her friends? She flashed me a smirk, the closest thing to a smile you could get out of her, and she said, "Yeah, because you love me," or something along those lines. I was so embarrassed, and George started laughing, which made it even worse. She was already moving past me, clearly not interested in continuing the conversation, and my window was closing. I don't know what came over me, but right there on the spot, I asked her out. That actually got her to stop, and she gave me one of her famous icy stares. She didn't even have to speak. Her eyes communicated everything. How dare you even ask me that? But then she surprised me. She actually agreed and gave me her number. Then she said she'd text me and walked away, not even letting me respond. I was shocked, but that's how I ended up going on a hike with the girl I was obsessing over for months. The hike wasn't my idea, by the way, none of it was. She organized it all, and I got the impression that I had no choice but to go along with whatever she wanted, and I was fine with that. So fast forward to the weekend, and Sienna's driving us out to this trail she picked. I'd never been to it, and neither had anyone I knew. The drive was about 45 minutes, but it felt like 10 because I was so in my head. Sienna had her window down and was playing music from her phone, stuff I didn't recognize, which tracked. We pulled into this gravel lot at the base of the trail. There were maybe 2 other cars there. Sienna didn't even think twice. She just started walking and I followed. For the first 20 minutes or so, things were actually great. Sienna was more talkative than I'd ever seen her, which admittedly still wasn't that talkative, but for her it was a lot. She asked me about the story I was writing, which was kind of embarrassing, but I gave her a rough summary while not trying to sound like an idiot. The trail narrowed after a while and the trees got denser. We hadn't seen another person since the parking lot. At some point, the trail split into a fork. I asked Sienna which way, and she pointed left without hesitating. I asked her if she'd been here before, and she said no. I found that a little strange, especially considering how definitive she seemed to be about everything, but I didn't say anything. The left fork was noticeably less maintained. I started to get the feeling we were going the wrong way, but I wasn't going to question her. I must have been really in my head about that, because at one point, I realized I couldn't hear Sienna's footsteps behind me anymore. The trail had gotten so narrow that we were walking single file, and I had taken the lead since she had gestured me to go first. But when I turned around to check on her, she wasn't there. The trail behind me was empty. I yelled her name, but I didn't get a response. I was confused, so I started walking back the way we had come. I made it back to the fork, and she wasn't there either. I figured she had probably stopped to use the bathroom and didn't want me to notice, which was a reasonable enough explanation. But I looked around some more and realized there was no side trail for her to wander off on. She was just gone, so I decided to try the right fork. To my surprise, that side was even more overgrown, and the further I walked, the less it felt like a real trail. I kept calling her name like an idiot, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't imagine why she would have abandoned me, so I genuinely thought it was an honest mistake or something. At one point, I heard a branch snap somewhere off to my left, deeper in the trees, and then when I looked over, I saw movement. Something shifted behind one of the thicker trees. I instantly knew what was going on. It was Sienna messing with me. That would have been on brand for her, so I figured I'd turn the tables on her and surprise her before she could surprise me. I slowly walked over to the tree as quietly as I could, and at the last second, I jumped to the side to scare her. But as I was mid-yell, I realized it wasn't Sienna. It was a man. I was horrified, but it was too late. I was inches away from this tall, middle-aged looking man who didn't seem scared in the slightest. I instinctively took a few steps backward, and the guy just stared at me. Before he could say anything, I blurted out that I was just looking for my friend or something like that, which in hindsight was a completely useless thing to say. He clearly didn't care. He started walking towards me, so I turned and started walking back toward the trail, trying not to run. But then I heard a second sound, this time from my right. I looked over and saw another person moving through the woods. The second guy wasn't even trying to hide. He was just standing in the open watching me, and he was holding what looked like a tree branch in his hand. That's when I just ran. The second guy was blocking the path back to the trail, so I was just running through the woods with no real sense of direction, hoping there was another way back to the main trail. As soon as I started running, both men started running after me. They weren't even trying to be quiet about it anymore. I ran for a few seconds, but it was hard because the woods were so dense. Before I could react, something grabbed my ankle and I fell. It was the first guy, and he was trying to pin me down. I screamed and kicked, and by some miracle, I was able to get him off me. I scrambled back to my feet and kept running. My mouth was full of blood at that point. I don't think they followed me after that, but I didn't care. I ran until I found the trail, then kept running until I made it back to the parking lot. Sienna's car was still in the lot, but the other two cars were gone. Sienna wasn't anywhere in sight, which freaked me out. I started thinking those guys who had tried to catch me got her, and that she was in danger. I didn't know what to do. I must have called her phone like 10 times and she didn't pick up. I was just about to call the police when she texted me asking where I had gone. I was typing a response when I looked up and saw her walking out of the tree line completely calm. I yelled at her to hurry, trying to explain what happened, but she didn't seem fazed. I told her I wasn't kidding, but she seemed more irritated than anything. Either way, we got in the car and started leaving. I told her everything, and she still didn't seem particularly moved, which was absolutely insane to me. That's when I demanded to know where she had gone. She told me she thought I had gone ahead without her, and that she was trying to catch up the whole time. I knew that was a lie because I walked all the way back to the fork, so there's no way I would have missed her. That's when it dawned on me that she might have had something to do with it. What that something could have been, I had no idea. The ride back was the tensest 45 minutes of my life. I kept looking over at her and wondering whether someone so innocent and nonchalant could do something so heartless and cruel. Honestly, the answer was probably yes. She got to my house, we said goodbye, and then I was alone again. I was still so shocked by the whole encounter. I couldn't get over the fact that within minutes of Sienna disappearing, 2 strangers appeared in the exact stretch of woods she led me into. The trail she picked, the fork she chose, and the position she put me in by letting me go first. It felt orchestrated. And then she just showed up after the whole thing without a scratch on her, asking me where I went. We didn't hang out a single time after that. I never asked her to, and if I wasn't reaching out to her, there was absolutely no chance she was going to reach out to me. I've told maybe 4 or 5 friends this story over the years, and the response is always the same. Sienna set me up. That she knew the trail and knew the people in the woods. I've considered that more times than I can count, but I just have no idea why anyone would do that. I have no idea where Sienna is now. She's not on social media, and I have no idea where she went to college.